2021's Shin-Chan, Me and the Professor on Summer Vacation was a big deal for a small community of people. Despite being a spin-off, it was the first official Western release from the Boku no Natsuyasumi or My Summer Vacation franchise, which has been going strong since the year 2000. If you have 6 spare hours and want like an excellent breakdown of Boku no Natsuyasumi, that first game, and kind of the whole franchise therein, go watch Tim Rogers' Action Button review of the game. It's really well done and might make you actually cry. You should check that out. But in the interest of time, let's break down what this franchise is all about. You play as a young kid vacationing with his family in the Japanese countryside and spend each day catching bugs, going fishing, talking to locals around town, and watching their small and deeply relatable stories play out over the course of one in-game month. The choice of what to do on a daily basis is pretty much left completely up to the player, and there are no win or lose states as long as you're generally comfortable or happy with whatever ending you receive by the time the credits roll. The games are technically period pieces. The first takes place in 1975, and the most recent one takes place in 1999, and they've all been developed by Millennium Kitchen and directed by Kaz Ayabe. Until 2021, apart from the vignette-adjacent Attack of the Friday monsters for the 3DS, which that's a game that really needs a Switch port, it's baffling that the eShop is closed and now Attack of the Friday monsters is totally unplayable. It's one of the best 3DS games. You can play it in 3 or 4 hours max. I really would like more people to be able to play it. I would like to, in this video, be able to say, hey, you should go play Attack of the Friday monsters, but legally, you can't, and that's a huge bummer, so maybe they'll save it one day. But anyway, until 2021, no Kaz Ayabe directed Boku no Natsuyasumi games or games like that had ever been released in the West until Shin-Chan, Me and the Professor on Summer Vacation, which blended Boku no Natsuyasumi with Crayon Shin-Chan, which is a manga and anime that has existed in Japan and has been a huge thing for ever and ever and ever. That game replaced series namesake Boku with Shinosuke Nohara, a kind of charmingly annoying 5-year-old who is visiting Kumamoto and Mount Aso, and whose penchant for misunderstanding the new words he's learning and pointing his butt at the camera kind of changed the entire tenor of the game's vibe in a really substantial way. While the Boku no Natsuyasumi games tended to be mostly relaxed and player-driven experiences, the Shin-Chan variant introduced a more direct plot into the adventure, pairing a more upfront narrative with Shin-Chan's whole rambunctious demeanor really changed the vibe of that game pretty substantially, which worked for players as much as it didn't work for some players. And I think for those of us who really wanted a My Summer Vacation game actually localized and in English, the response to that game was a little more of this is what we get and we should be happy about it, instead of totally embracing it with open arms. Now, to be clear, this is totally, absolutely unfair framing for that game. I actually liked it a lot, even though I would have, I think, preferred just My Summer Vacation to get localized and released over here. There was something about that game that really stuck out to me, really spoke to me. I thought it was really a good time, and the ways in which it changed the franchise, I think, were really interesting. That said, I doubly enjoyed it when I went to Kumamoto and Mount Aso, the places where that game is set, for myself to visit a friend. Really just added a whole new level of appreciation for that game. So despite being seen by some as a lesser Boku no Natsuyasumi release, it felt kind of unique enough to stand on its own eventually. Ayabe and the team at Millennium Kitchen imbued this gameplay loop that they really knew inside and out with a charm and, in that case, literal, actual magic that broadened its appeal for a totally new audience. It's not a better or worse Boku no Natsuyasumi by virtue of having a new protagonist with a totally new vibe. He fits into those puzzle pieces in a new way and creates something that feels new, feels distinct. Shin-Chan, Shiro, and the Cold Town goes even further down this path in multiple ways. At the highest level, Kaz Ayabe only supervised development of this game. This time, the reins and heavy lifting have been passed over to Hand, who you might know from their work on games like The World Ends With You, Kingdom Hearts 358 Over 2 Days, and my beloved Fantasy Life for the Nintendo 3DS. Shiro and the Cold Town opens in a way that will feel very familiar to My Summer Vacation or Me and the Professor on Summer Vacation fans. Shinosuke's family moves to the rural unbent village in the Akita prefecture, and right from the jump, his grandfather teaches him how to catch bugs on the first day and how to catch fish on the second day. In each of these days, Shin-Chan is let loose on a portion of the village to meet its residents and eventually just tire himself out until the in-game clock deems it time for bed. At a glance, this sounds very similar to its franchise roots, but little touches here and there continue to set it apart. The removal of a calendar system counting down the days until the end of summer, the lack of a journal for Shin-Chan to record his thoughts in, and even the ability to just save at any time, all point to little deviations that set the game apart from its predecessor and take one more step towards finding its own identity. The biggest shift that is right in line, though, with Me and the Professor on Summer Vacation is what happens on day 3. On the third day, Shin-Chan's dog, Shiro, briefly goes missing and returns covered in soot. As Shiro leads Shinosuke into the nearby woods, an unmanned trolley appears and transports the two of them to a visually warped fantasy city. It's the titular Coal Town, which is eerily reminiscent of Final Fantasy VII's Midgar, but is perpetually basked in sunset. Now, there's a lot to talk about when it comes to Coal Town as a setting. It's got a villainous overlord and some like Team Rocket-esque followers who claim to be helping the city. There's a new miracle energy source called Alamine coal, which is literally the calcified sweat and tears of the miners who have been working in the city's tunnels for God knows how long. And there's a curious balance between feeling obviously dystopic and yet finding its citizens thriving all the same. Visits to Coal Town utilize the same daily clock as the time spent in Unbent Village, and upon leaving via the trolley, Shin-Chan finds himself waking up in his own house from a nap he doesn't remember choosing to take. His family and the other people around him have never heard of Coal Town, and yet a large, crater-shaped lake sits nestled just over a nearby hilltop that resembles the exact same view you can find at the top of Coal Town's metal frame. Shiro in the Coal Town has a lot on its mind, which is par for the course when it comes to My Summer Vacation as a franchise, but it generally doesn't go as far as just shifting the entire genre into an isekai, which is a version of storytelling in which a person is just whisked off into a fantasy land. Even Coal Town's art direction being literally inconsistent with reality, twisted and wild and unsettling in ways, it screams to the player like, hello, this game is about something, dude. What that is, I've probably said too much already, but if any of that sounds interesting to you, you should play the game and get some more context for yourself. And as far as the actual playing of the video game is concerned, by the time you're already in the thick of things, Shin-Chan's options just kind of open at a surprising clip. The general day in-game is as follows. After waking up, you'll tend to the vegetable garden and decide if you want to be spending more time in Unbent Village or in Coal Town. This will mostly be dictated by the abundance of fetch quests you'll have thrown at you, as some will involve farming, catching bugs, and fishing to produce new recipes that can be served in Coal Town's local diner, and some will involve collecting various minerals and machine parts to create new inventions which help Coal Town's citizens in different ways. In both locations, residents will hand out subquests like candy, all of which involve gathering the required materials to progress, and bulletin boards with rotating requests which enable Shin-Chan to deposit his findings for money, which then can be spent on even more materials to move forward in all of the above quests. This will either sound brutally tedious or absolutely enthralling to totally different groups of players. I find myself straddling the line kind of right between them, I would say. As we've now distanced ourselves from Boku no Natsuyasumi enough to consider the Shin-Chan games a totally different thing, it's worth noting that collecting all of these materials takes a lot of time. Vegetables take multiple days to grow, and you will never, ever have enough hours in the day to scour Coal Town for the needed invention materials in one fell swoop, and the game's lack of any kind of calendar system means you have ample opportunity to do everything if you desire. It's just going to take multiple days. While My Summer Vacation focuses on player choice with regards to using your limited time wisely, Shin-Chan games are growing to focus on player choice with regards to how intensely you want to plow through all of the game's content. Do you want to min-max the whole thing, yes or no? Both Shiro in the Coal Town and Me and the Professor on Summer Vacation are beautiful games with lavishly hand-drawn fixed backgrounds and stellar audio design to match. For the first time in one of these games, you can spend your days soaking all of that in without the fear of wasting the summer away. This is going to feel like a point of contention to some, as I think a lot of people would argue that the point of my summer vacation as a franchise is that oscillation between enjoying the time that you're spending in the summer, but also making sure that you do enough, very much like actually being a kid in the summer, just like waiting for school to start and being so afraid that you didn't do enough. And for me personally, that's what I went into Shiro in the Cold Town expecting. I didn't expect it to remove the calendar system entirely. So in that way, once you've locked into its easygoing pace, Shiro in the Cold Town feels the most relaxed any of these games have ever been, which also makes it easier to recommend to people who bristle at time constraints in video games. And I get that to a certain extent. Games like Stardew Valley, for example, I don't love it as much as I really wish I did and as much as other people do, and that's mostly because of the energy meter and because of the limited time per day. I wanted that game to be relaxing, and instead I really felt like I was constantly being pushed against the clock, and that didn't feel good. That said, I understand and even appreciate these kinds of mechanics. Persona 3, for example, is maybe the best ever implementation of a calendar mechanic I've ever played for myself, and it earns that addition by layering just heaps and heaps of thematic exploration to aid the decision of limiting a player's time. But as the previous Shin-Chan game began to push outside of that limitation, I was glad to see Shiro in the Cold Town just take the extra step of removing it entirely. And also, not to worry for those of you who feel very strongly about the inclusion of a calendar system. The main reason Millennium Kitchen was uninvolved in this thing is because they were working on another video game. Natsu-mon 20th Century Summer Kid is another bold new step forward in the franchise that celebrates its history while exploring entirely new ways of interacting with the game's world, and it was finally localized and released here this past June. You should play it. It's also very good. Here it is. I got it. I'll have the Japanese one, but I have it also in English on my Switch right now. And actually, one of the things that draws me to these games in the first place, and the reason I picked up a copy of Natsu-mon 20th Century Summer Kid before it was localized while I was in Japan, is that I realized during my trip that the sounds of Tokyo and Kumamoto and all the places I visited in between were building up to be like the core memory of my experience there. The cicadas and the distinctive bird song and the rail crossing bells and so many other tiny sonic touches all melded together into a like crystalline encapsulation of what felt unique to those locales. And yeah, there are like a million other things that could bubble up to being just as important in my mind's eye, like obviously the food is a big one, but I couldn't even tell you the number of times I literally just closed my eyes and let myself bathe in the melody of my surroundings. I knew about halfway through that trip that sound over all else would be the thing I miss most upon returning home. Shiro in the Cold Town, just like Boku no Natsuyasumi before it, revels in sound. And just like my own summer vacation in actual Japan, I spent a surprising amount of time playing this game, just sitting on a bench and listening to the different sounds pour out of my headphones during the morning, and during the sunset, and in the evening hours of Akita. It's this attention to detail across pretty much every aesthetic-driven part of the game that makes it a joy to play, even if, mechanically, it leaves a little bit to be desired. Talking to the colorful cast that makes up each of the town's inhabitants, and the evolution of Shin-Chan's options as each day goes by, are core to the experience, and make Shiro and the Cold Town worth playing if you're looking to immerse yourself in a charming, silly, alluring space. At the core of all of these games, but especially one where the removal of a time constraint just changes the tenor of the adventure entirely, is the understanding that for most people, life is the spice of change in an established routine. Wim Wenders' 2023 film Perfect Days follows around 1 week in the life of Hirayama. He's a man who cleans public bathrooms all around Tokyo and is like cemented in his titular perfect days. Every single day he wakes up and he trims his beard. He gets the same can of Boss iced coffee from a vending machine right outside of his apartment. And then he goes to work and he eats his lunch in the same spot. And after his shift, he goes to the public baths every single day. And after that, he goes and gets a highball from his favorite bar. And he goes home and he falls asleep reading a book, day in and day out. And while it's easy to watch that movie and walk away thinking like, wow, if only I could appreciate the little things in life as much as this guy who cleans toilets for a living, that would be missing the point of the movie pretty much entirely. Hirayama is a captive of his own routine, and you can see that in the discomfort that he expresses as little changes start to bubble up and and break that routine. Because it turns out the trick to a healthy lifestyle isn't just perfecting your days and your routine and sanding off all of the edges of the things that can inconvenience you or harm you, but it's about accepting the tides between what can and can't be controlled. It's appreciating what we have and striving to help others. It's improving through adversity, both yourself and those around you. It's balance. Shiro in the Coal Town is available on Nintendo Switch and PC. I played it mostly on Steam Deck, and I liked it a lot. I liked it a whole lot. I'll probably keep playing it, honestly. It's good. But that's it for me this time around. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Thanks to everybody who has done that. If you've watched previous videos and you've come back, that means a lot. Thank you so much. If you liked this thing, let me know in the comments. If you played Shiro in the Coal Town and you liked that, let me know that in the comments as well. And you can follow me all over the place and read a written version of this if you want at wavelengths.online. There's some slight changes here and there. I mean, you get it. I'm speaking this, and I wrote that. They're different. They're different enough. All right. Bye, everybody.